I think this course is very important because it's addressing a critical issue as we're moving forward towards the implementation of the 2030 Development Agenda. We need to understand how policy interventions connect with one another. And you know very well that for the first time, migration has been now fully included within this SDG. And that's very important for us to understand, therefore, how to fit migration into that picture so that we can fully reap the benefit of having migration part of the agenda. So this course is very important for practitioners to actually disentangle how migration relates to other sectoral policies and understand how to make those connections in very practical terms. So what does it mean in terms of policy planning? What does it mean in terms of the type of coordination mechanisms that have to be put in place in countries to facilitate that process? And understand as well how to report on this work in order to indeed get to attain the goals as they are set in the agenda. So I think this course, therefore, is of extreme importance, not only for governments that are in charge of implementing the agenda, but as well for other migration and development practitioners, part of the civil society, as well as the social partners that have a very important role to play. So overall, I think this could really help all of us as international community to move forward and again realize the full potential of the SDGs in relation to migration. That's a very important part of what we have to strive to do as UN family. We have to connect the dots. So it's not only important, of course, to do that among policy areas, but of course the different specialized organizations of the United Nations system need to work together. And there's a clear added value for IOM and ITCILO to work in that area. IOM bringing very much, of course, the content and the knowledge and the mandate when it comes to migration. And the International Training Center of the ILO, bringing not only content as well, but also, all the pedagogical aspects. So I think, the two organizations working together, adding tremendous value. I think it's a very important element that has been quite overlooked, because when we think of migration mainstreaming, or when we think of policy coherence, and I think it's a better way actually to talk about migration mainstreaming, it's to focus on policy coherence. We've tended really to do it across sectors. So, with a strong understanding that actually what is being done in one specific policy sector has impact on other policy sectors, and providing migration is a cross-cutting issue. Understanding those relationships is of extreme importance. And doing that in an area where you don't have a lot of reliable data when it comes to migration can be challenging, but nevertheless extremely important, also in relation to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. But we haven't worked so much on another very important element of policy coherence, that is what we call vertical policy coherence, which means basically what is being done across the board between different levels of governance. Because we tend to think of migration as something that is firmly in the hands of the national states, because indeed they are the ones that are responsible for all the policies related to access to the territory. They are responsible in general terms as well for articulating migration with other policy interventions. But when it comes to the actual impact of migration, this is something that is taking place in the context of specific territory, which means that in real life, in real daily life, it is really local and regional authorities, including cities, that are the ones dealing with the impact of migration. They are the ones that have to provide relevant services to the population, including migrants, including families of migrants. And this is something that happens both in terms of the countries of origin as well as the countries of destination. So we have tended really to focus only on national levels, whereas actually, if we want to connect migration with its development impact, we have to work most and foremost at the local level. But what we see in many cases is that there is no real attempt to connect what's being done at local level with what's being done at the national level. So you end up in a situation where you may have policy interventions that are not being applied properly at the local level, the ones that are designed by the national level. Or you may have a situation also where local level policy making, because indeed local actors are policymakers of their own right, the innovation that they can sometimes produce in their local context not being captured in national policy making. So basically, when we think of policy coherence on migration, we're not looking only at a one-way relationship, whereby it's the national level that is imposing, its policies onto the local level, but it can also be very much a bottom-up dynamic. And it's really those kind of two-way streets that we have to explore the potential of, and the potential is absolutely enormous, as a matter of fact. And it's very much the case that also we have to understand one thing, is that we tend to think of migration as a phenomenon that links countries with one another. But at the end of the day, what we can observe is that you do have migratory corridors existing between specific localities. So people living from a very specific territory in a country of origin, arriving to a specific city in a country of destination. And what is really interesting when we want to connect migration with its development potential is to actually see what are the development connections that we can see through those local to local migratory corridors. So that's why, we see more and more territories, local authorities in charge of those territories, taking more and more importance in terms of policy making, having more and more innovation in this field. Sometimes, really addressing shortcomings that may happen at national policy level, because sometimes some of the legislation that are being designed at national policy level, they are creating inconsistencies in local context. So, for example, when it comes to access to education of children of irregular migrants, in a local community, you have to embed those kids in the local schools. Otherwise, you're creating problems. Yet it may actually clash with the national level legislation. So you see basically how this issue of policy coherence is so key, because it has direct impact on the way migrants can actually fare in the society. So this is why we need to work on this dimension. And the other also very important compelling reasons is that we see cities in particular becoming global actors, with the fact that we have an increasingly urbanized world where we have megacities that are developing their own diplomacies, that are really policymakers of their own right, that are trying really to connect themselves, internationally with other cities, advancing their own policy agenda. So it has a tremendous potential in terms of migration. So it is really important, therefore, to connect the dots, between those dynamics happening between cities internationally with what governments are also discussing internationally with one another. So that's why this whole aspect of policy coherence at the vertical level is so important, yet not so well explored. But we're very happy with this training to be zooming onto that, and also building on the fact that we've developed a lot of tools already to support local and regional authorities and city officials in their role as policymakers and as actors of migration governance in their own right, and still connecting, the work they do, again, with a national level. But I would want to also add another level, which is the global level, because of course a lot of what we're talking about in terms of migration and development has to do with, international, accord that exists between governments. So it's really important, therefore, to have coherence not only between the local and the national, but also between the local, the national, and the global level. So this is really how we're going to be really fully realizing the potential of migration for development.